The slow passage of time on objects exposes these to all kinds of aggression. External agents and human activity act on them, damaging them, wearing them out, rusting them, rotting them. Water, fire, insects, and microorganisms are together with man their fiercest enemies. What makes man different from the other forces is that they are the only ones who can stop or hold back the process which, without their intervention, would be irreversible. Scientific interest in art conservation has developed over the last century based on science and technology. The main criterion is that nothing that is external or foreign to the piece should be added. In those cases where it is essential to transgress this general principle, two requirements should be rigorously met. Whatever has been added should be clearly appreciated, and it should also be possible to remove it without this jeopardizing the integrity of the whole. Moreover, in many cases, it is necessary for the piece of work to recover its function and arrangement. These requirements are the result of the experience accumulated by curators who have learnt that a piece of work is never definitively restored. Technical advances occur very quickly, and respect for what could be done in the future makes restorers work cautiously so that their current intervention does not obstruct future restorations. Grand official buildings are historical scenarios and are both the symbols and the showcases of nations.
Было бы непростительно упустить его.
We must fix our vision on what real peace would bring. Peace, after all, means not just avoiding war and the costs of preparing for it.
Bienvenidos a Madrid, bienvenidos a España, convertidas hoy con su presencia en capital y patria de la esperanza de paz.
The halls of these buildings are the scene of events which affect us all. Sometimes they are even privileged enough to witness the signing of treaties which constitute the first building blocks of a fragile peace. The area where the Royal Palace in Madrid now stands has been a center of power since the earliest times. But the first stone for the building which stands here today was laid only 2.5 centuries ago, and this palace replaced an older one built by the Austrian dynasty, which fell victim to fire. This enormous building and everything which it contains is a very important part of the Spanish National Trust. The Spanish National Trust deals with the state heritage which is at the disposal of the Crown. This great group of palaces and monasteries also contains some splendid and valuable collections of artworks. All these works are at the disposal and service of His Majesty the King, so that he can carry out state functions, and they are also at the service of all people as a permanent conveyor of our culture. All these riches and this heritage from our history demand constant care, protection, and restoration so that they remain in perfect condition. For this reason, the National Trust has a number of workshops where the necessary restoration can be carried out. Here we are entering the very heart of the palace, the throne room. The throne room is spacious, but it is neither arrogant nor imposing in its dimensions, and was designed by the educated and prudent monarch Charles III. The symbols with which it is decorated reflect more than anything else the character of the monarch who occupied the throne at the time. Around the throne itself, the four theological virtues are represented: prudence, justice, strength, and moderation, fit companions for one who wielded absolute power. The wish to maintain the palace as a living building demands constant effort from all those who are responsible for its care and maintenance. The enormous number of works of art held within its walls and their high quality and historical value mean that the conditions under which their conservation is carried out have to be constantly monitored. There are kilometers of halls and rooms full of stuccos, drapes, gilded objects, tapestries, clocks, porcelain, chandeliers, mirrors, furniture, pictures and carpets, which have to be kept in perfect condition in spite of the hundreds of tourists and the additional enormous effort needed for their conservation which this implies. There is one particular part of the National Trust which consists of all the halls of the palace where state functions are held, the presentation of credentials, state banquets, audiences, and this means that it is not only necessary to restore the room itself, but to restore it so that it can be used, since it is not the same thing to keep a work of art in a glass case as to keep it in a hall in the very place where it was intended to be displayed. The vast range of different materials and objects with which the restoration studios of the palace faced requires a small army of specialists who are fully acquainted with the technical details and production processes long forgotten or abandoned over the years. And they also need to know about materials which are no longer in current use at the beginning of the 21st century. In some cases, the old traditions cannot be learned from books, but are handed down from generation to generation. This is the case with the Toboso family, who have worked in the palace for generations. In the workshops of the studios, modern techniques are used for the treatment of various pieces. Ultrasonic techniques, for example, are used for the cleaning of delicate surfaces. The collection contained in the Royal Armoury is priceless from a purely historical point of view, as well as on account of the precision of the different mechanisms. Specialists first turn to documentation contained in the archives, where even the smallest details of each weapon are recorded before beginning any restoration. A vast range of restoration techniques are employed since many different objects from different places have been collected over the years. These pieces, on account of the decorations which have been applied, are truly unique. Embossed with coral, mother-of-pearl, and precious stones, they seem more like jewels or personal adornments than firearms. The furniture in the palace, which encompasses several different eras and styles, is the responsibility of the joinery and upholstery department, and it is here that the necessary adjustments and repairs are carried out to keep the furniture in good condition. But the various different departments scarcely ever operate in isolation, since many works of restoration draw on several different areas of expertise. In an environment like a palace, each individual piece also forms a part of and is understood within the context of the general decoration and architecture dictated by a particular historical style. One important area in the upkeep of the palace as a whole is the restoration of the gilded surfaces, which cover some hundreds of square meters. Gilders work using traditional techniques, which incorporate knowledge acquired over centuries. Machines are unable to duplicate their ability to manually handle and apply the fine gold leaf. From the point of view of restoration, the most important thing in this room is the old upholstery, which has to be cleaned and kept in a textile depository so that it is available for researchers. But in order to be able to use the room again in its original form, it is necessary to reupholster it with cloth of the same kind as that which exists now. The restoration of large upholstered surfaces has to be accomplished in such a way that the building is in a perfect state and can continue to be used. But in the textile workshop in the palace, work is also undertaken on other types of pieces, and research is constantly being carried out. There are also numerous ceramic pieces in the palace. Quite apart from the valuable individual ceramic objects placed in rooms and on tables, there are whole rooms where the decoration is based on ceramic reliefs. The Royal Palace in Madrid also contains many other exceptional artifacts amongst its treasures. The section for gold artifacts includes some very remarkable pieces, as well as some unusual, miniature and whimsical decorative articles, like this circular alabaster shrine made during the first third of the 19th century. Reliquaries designed to hold the remains of martyrs and saints were also in most cases made of precious metals. This nativity scene, made from wood, coral, silver, copper and brass during the first half of the 16th century, is an exquisite and delicate piece of work. Each piece has its own history and forms an integral part of the group. This jewel case belonging to Isabel II is a miniature safe. It is very easy to open when you know how, but if not, it would be a challenge to a thief even today. Then there are the clocks. Their hands have turned for centuries, and they have been witness to the rhythms of war and peace, to weddings and funerals, and to joys and sorrows. These are pieces which move and even have a voice. They are monuments to the skills of the clockmakers, and their precision movements are only fully appreciated when the moment comes to restore them. There are clocks of all different kinds, decorated in all different ways. They are in turn ornamental, scientific, coquettish, solemn, precisely accurate, and pretentious. There are planetary clocks, astral clocks, and clocks reflecting the stars, all ceaselessly marking the passage of time. The Trust, of course, has a painting studio as well, although most of the Spanish royal collection was transferred to the Prado Museum when it was first established. The part of the collection which now hangs on the palace walls portrays previous occupants of the building, former kings and queens who seem to be saying farewell to the groups of tourists who have completed their visit to this amazing collection of curious and wonderful objects. Very few of them are aware of the efforts being carried out daily to preserve and look after what they have just seen. There are places in the world where it is clear that more lies behind what is immediately visible. Places where a special silence reigns, where the word has a special meaning. The library in El Escorial on the outskirts of Madrid is one of these special magnetic places. Conversations overheard in this room have without a doubt brought something invisible to it, a certain sensitivity, since from its very creation this room was intended to be a spiritual point, with a certain spirituality which is not necessarily linked to that of religion. It was in this room that the world was analyzed, for this was the center of activity of the Spanish Empire at a time when the sun did not set within its bounds. The very best brains of the Catholic world, who were philosophers, geographers, astronomers, alchemists, or who sometimes combined all disciplines, used the library in El Escorial as their base and as the source of information. A veneer of doubts and certainties, of wisdom and ignorance, of beliefs and mistakes, gives these objects their own personality, in that they have witnessed the efforts of human intelligence to come to terms with the world in which it finds itself. The monastery of El Escorial, considered to be the eighth wonder of the world, is on the outskirts of Madrid. Its conservation also falls to the National Trust, and in total it is many times larger than the Royal Palace in Madrid. A high price in terms of restoration must be paid to keep the building alive and open to visitors. The lower part of these frescoes, for example, which is within reach of visitors, has been restored. But we are not talking about a modern problem, since they are also graffiti which date back to the 8th century. Attempts were made to protect it with glass panels, but tourists pushed coins in between the glass and the wall and caused considerable damage to the painting. When one considers El Escorial, it seems that it is endless. Room after room follow on in endless succession. Restoration work here is monumental, for the simple reason that the monastery itself is so huge and imperial. For Spain, the 16th century was the high point in its entire history, and the Escorial is the perfect embodiment of the importance of the age. Its straight, clean lines reflect the severity of Castile, and were it not for the addition of some color and embellishment, it would look very ominous. This is why the religious frescoes were originally introduced, and they represent the best paintings of this type of their time. This was not the first time that they have undergone restoration. They have always been within the reach of visitors, and some people have felt the necessity to leave some mark of their visit, to scratch a desperate record of their existence as the years flowed by. It is a very human temptation, and after all, even the artists themselves left their own mark behind. But finally, their time came for the marks to disappear in the hands of the restorers, who have made every effort to return these maltreated painted surfaces to their original brilliance and freshness. The scratches which have marks on them are first stuccoed and then hidden with color. A hushed music seems to descend from the empirical scene, a solemn symphony, the noise of staring bodies congregating around the glory of the Spanish monarch in the 16th century. Fortunately, no one has managed to reach the magnificent paintings which decorate the ceiling of the principal staircase. They are too high up, and they give the impression of being even higher. This place, which is huge and bare, is so impressive that it seems to have a paralyzing effect. The various works of restoration which were carried out in El Escorial were not independent of one another. There was an overall concept of restoring the grandiose building in its entirety. Situated as it is in the mountains north of Madrid, it has been subjected to a mountain climate for centuries, and although the fabric of the building, which is made of granite, is not in danger, the passing of time has had some effect on some of the patios and roofs. The greatest restoration efforts in the monastery concentrated in the so-called Sala de Batallas, or Hall of Battles. According to some tapestries which were discovered centuries later in the palace at Segovia, Tabarone, Cambiaso, Granello and Castelló began the paintings here in 1585. There is evidence of 16 quite extensive restorations since the 17th century. For this restoration, the 17th, they estimated that it would be necessary to employ a team of 10 specialists for a period of 3.5 years. But it was hard to estimate with any precision, since in this kind of work time can be multiplied 2 to 5 times, as unforeseen circumstances crop up during the course of the process. The real problems which are likely to arise cannot be identified until the conservation work begins. and only then can the restorer have any idea of the extent of the work which faces him. The battle against persistent humidity, the discovery of original paintings underneath repainted areas, as well as other possible surprises of this magnitude or even greater magnitude, all serve to make the restorer cautious, and any prior estimates are couched with reservations. The painting of a fresco also made its own demands in terms of timing. The artists who carried it out began preparing the plaster many months in advance, and any decision which was made in a hurry could well have had bad repercussions for work carried out in the Hall of Battles. As for the frescoes themselves, the detailed work which the painting requires and the criteria of modern restoration meant that a meticulous regatino art should be used instead of traditional repainting, and this made the work of the restorer very much more complicated. But on the other hand, it meant that the restoration of the work and its authenticity was far better than any previous work carried out in the Hall of Battles. But why is it called the Hall of Battles? Perhaps because power always needs a reminder that it must overcome other powers in order to survive. Sometimes it even needs to overcome its own power. Here, power confronts power. Lance confronts lance. Helmet confronts helmet. Just like warring rams following some atavistic impulse and multiplying the tombs of the dead. Cannons, banners waving in the wind, polished armor violently shining in the sun, spurs digging into the horses' flanks, the steel of crossbows, unbelievable wounds, shouts of rage and of anguish, the desperate neighing of horses, implacable cavalry squadrons opening up a route through ranks of infantry like a combine harvester moving through the grain fields. These men, however, have faith in what they are doing. They are the defenders of the king, of the faith, of the Pope, and of the fatherland. They sense the weight of history and they go into combat willingly and with determination. What else could make them lift up their arms if not conviction? It was complete conviction which made them wield their swords, and complete conviction which led to so many committed dead men. El Escorial is a surprising mix of love and violence, because it was built as a result of spiritualism combined with power. It is not a beautiful building, but it was never intended to be so. It is awesome and attracts and terrifies at one and the same time. It is not amenable but severe. It is distant and unwelcoming but remains aloof. Nothing could be more alien to our own time and our own customs than these imposing walls which offer no sanctuary. This construction of straight lines which does not make the slightest concession. These angles and borders which seem to want to purify thought and faith until they become pure abstract geometry. But even so, it has an awesome beauty of its own. At the beginning of the 13th century, the city of Burgos was the seat of the court of Castile. And in 1221, the first stone was laid of what would become one of the most beautiful cathedrals in the Catholic world. Now, almost 8 centuries later, its delicate structures are still standing and bear witness to the zeal and dedication of its builders. But time has taken its toll, and only timely intervention to restore the building has put a stop to further deterioration. The scaffolding which was erected around it to carry out the restoration gave the church a curiously modern appearance, and the Gothic cathedral lied hidden behind what looked like an office building. The square constructions which mask the delicate patterns of its towers also serve to highlight the harmonious proportions of the original building. Any attempt to restore these stone needles, which are covered with sculpted reliefs, is an enormous undertaking. Especially when one realizes that this is not a task which is limited to the surfaces of the structure, but which goes deep into the structure itself. The surface of the cathedral had been affected by the passage of time. Accumulated dirt over the centuries had concentrated in those areas which escaped naturally being washed off by the rain. And at these points, the surface of the stone had reacted with the chemical agents which had fallen on it. The result was a progressive deterioration of the surface which had caused successive layers of stone to break away, and which could in the end destroy the stone completely. This was the reason for the leprous effect on certain parts which were once intricately carved and polished. Preliminary research precedes any restoration work. It is imperative to know in detail how the microprocesses which are taking place in the stone have come about. Just like hospital patients, these reliefs yield data through sensitive instruments which will later be carefully analyzed by specialists. The whole monument was threatened by deterioration, and the anxious specialists undertook extensive studies of the general condition of the whole church and discovered that the two needles were in greatest danger, since they were originally constructed of stone openwork to save weight. Deterioration of the towers of the cathedral in Burgos is divided into three distinct types: the inevitable aging of the material of which they are made, the effect of the level of industrialization of contemporary society, and the damage caused by man. In the towers, unlike the rest of the cathedral, the effects of pollution have been minimal, since they stand over 80 meters above ground. But man has had a negative effect on the towers. In the 30s, a metal structure was introduced to support the bells and the staircase leading up to the balcony on top of the tower. But the structure was completely independent from the tower itself. A lack of knowledge in the 60s led to this metal structure being concreted to the stone of the towers themselves. The corrosion of the metal structure over the years produced a wave effect, which caused the stone towers to crack, and some cracks now measure more than 4 centimeters. The solution has been to micro-sew the cracks together, but in particular to isolate the negative influence which the metal structure was having through the concrete, by making the two structures independent of one another. One of the towers has already been restored and the scaffolding has been removed, and it is possible to see the detail which the cleaning process has revealed, such as these fine carvings all along the edge of the structure. The stonemasons knew that their work would not be visible from the ground, but this in no way affected the quality of their work. Work on surfaces as complex as these has to be very precisely planned, and the exact measurement of each one of the thousands of elements which make up the pattern was calculated and recorded. A supplementary technique known as photometrics is of great assistance in the restoration of buildings. The photometrics department of the Spanish Institute of Historical Heritage can provide plans by using pairs of photographs taken with special cameras, which are linked to precise topographical points. Plates are put into an optical apparatus called a restorer, where a stereoscopic image of the monument is generated, which the operator can interpret using both his hands and his feet. The results are read by an automatic design machine which transfers the various operations onto paper. The relationship which exists between the distance between various parts of the building and their size is therefore mathematically guaranteed. The restored image can be generated to an appropriate scale for the subsequent work of restoring the monument. The resulting plans are an insurance for the future in the conservation of these architectural treasures, since they ensure that any future work will be carried out with complete precision. The vault of the dome of the cathedral at Burgos is a reminder that it is on the inside that the building really comes into its own. The interior of the cathedral is even more impressive than the exterior. On the walls and the internal structures, stone has been transformed into figures, flowers, and swords. A petrified world full of messages and symbols, stone filigree erected by and in the service of Christianity. The church, as the owner of these architectural jewels, has been dedicated to their conservation since the very beginning. And there is even an ecclesiastical post which reflects this task, that of the church warden, that is as old as the cathedrals themselves. He is appointed by the chapter and is in charge of all works carried out within the cathedral, is responsible for identifying all the needs of the building, and is especially responsible for the conservation of the building itself, as well as of all the artifacts which the building contains. The interior restoration of the cathedral's chapels turned the church into a forest of scaffolding, a three-dimensional spider's web which the restorer had to learn to navigate with ease. Platforms on different levels allowed access to the highest areas, right up into the heavens. Restorers were thus able to reach parts of the cathedral which had not been seen since the building was constructed. But everywhere, even in hidden recesses, there was the same striving for perfection and the same careful attention to detail. There are 2 kilometers of reliefs like these, for example, in this chapel alone. Detailed restoration provides an opportunity to study in depth some of the little-known aspects of the construction techniques and the sculpture of the Middle Ages. And the more that is learned, the more surprises there are in store. It is clear that cathedrals offer much more than they appear to do so at first sight, and there is still much more to be learned. Not very long after America was discovered, the admirals from Castile decided to endow the Cathedral of Burgos with something that later would be considered one of the best ornamental groups of religious art that were carried out at that time. 5 centuries later, the altarpieces that composed what was called Condestable Chapel were dismantled for its restoration in the same cathedral enclosure. The complexity of this intervention can be judged by the state and the quality of the sizes that, once restored, they should adjust to each other with the precision of a clockwork mechanism. During the process, the director of the restoration was forced to take very radical decisions. One of them was to make copies of the most important pieces in the group that would replace the original ones when the altarpiece was installed again. That way, the originals would be exhibited so that the public would have occasion of appreciating close-up the extraordinary quality that up until now went unnoticed due to the high places where the pieces were. This decision had another reason not less justified. It allowed, for example, to maintain original pieces in more appropriate environmental conditions and safe from new attacks of xylophag insects. On the other hand, the decision respected a basic rule. All these copies could be replaced again by their originals whenever this was required. It is essential to insist on making the extraordinary effort that involves this work on these masterpieces of medieval and Renaissance carving. To finance all this effort, it was necessary to obtain the support of private individuals and entities. Society can also contribute with an effective way to the best conservation and restoration of monuments, and very especially of the wealth contained inside these big cathedrals. The exhibition of the imagery of the Condestable Chapel's altarpieces is an example of this action shared between associations and institutions, and a result that one can achieve with these kind of procedures. In the Condestable Chapel, there is not only one altarpiece, but several that include exceptional pieces, as the Santa Anna triplex of Gil de Siloe. Or this nativity original of his son, Diego de Siloe, with serious deteriorations in the boy's figure. Or the elegant Angel of the Announcement painted by Felipe de Vigarny. The average quality of the pieces is really extraordinary, and so are the strange symbols they sometimes have. Like in the case of this singular piece known as the Synagogue, whose gloomy force is still more accentuated by the curious circumstance that the xylophage insects chose to attack the most dramatic area in the carving. It is very remarkable that most of these sacred sculptures appear sustaining books in their hands. The books certainly are also sacred, and the artist's scruple wrote on their pages, even knowing that, due to its position on the altar place, the detail could not be appreciated. People who are in daily contact with this national heritage carry out the vital service of both watching over it and educating others about it. But they obviously cannot carry out all the work themselves. They need the help of specialists to tackle large works of art like this one. This is one of the largest works by Claudio Coello and was made in 1668. It was actually made in situ and then placed on this wall. The whole altarpiece was built around it afterwards, and that is why it is so difficult to restore. These are polychromes which were lifted up in pans and fixed with steam. There have been several attempts at restoration over recent years, and above all, one attempt which was the worst of all, during the 19th century, which has been totally removed. The original colors used by Claudio Coello can now be seen in all their glory, just as he intended. The resources seem quite limited when one considers the enormous amount of work required to maintain the vast quantity of statues, carvings, porticos, friezes, columns, and paintings, which are all part of the national heritage. Many of these pieces portray scenes from the past which together provide valuable information for understanding the past centuries, and which may seem very prolific judging from the extraordinary heritage they have left us.